You are now listening to a podcast made in collaboration with the Copenhagen College Radio.
Aloha, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Social Media and Politics Podcast, bringing you expert insights into how social media is changing the political game. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, PhD student at the University of Copenhagen. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at SMNP Podcast, or follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Social Media and Politics Podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about
Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden.
You better believe it, because Sweden's pretty cool. And we're going to be looking at how the curators of Sweden's official social media accounts responded to that statement. So here's the clip that, again, was held at a rally in Melbourne, Florida on February 18th.
You look at what's happening in Germany. You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden. They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible.
And so the controversy about that statement was that there was no incident last night in Sweden. Trump tweeted that his comment was in reference to a Fox News broadcast that he saw last night about Sweden in terms of rising crime with refugees. So he kind of misspoke. There was some skepticism as to whether he was trying to invent a terrorist attack to invoke fear. It seems that the wires in his brain just crossed and he misspoke. But regardless, the Twitter sphere went nuts with a hashtag last night in Sweden where people were posting videos of the Swedish chef or very ridiculous things that are not terrorist attacks, but saying this is what happened last night in Sweden and a guy knocks over a trash can or whatever. So the media was reporting about this like nuts. It became a very focal point from this rally. And what's interesting is that in Sweden, there is an organization called the Swedish Institute, which their goal is to promote knowledge and interest about Sweden to the world. And it's kind of cool. If you go and check out their communication strategy, it's very much focused on the world is very globalized. Sweden's a small country. We need to actively promote ourselves and our values in order to attract trade, attract tourism, attract students, for example. And they have a Facebook and Twitter presence, which basically comprises of accounts that represent Sweden. And only because it's a little bit confusing in the beginning of the interview, on Twitter, there's two accounts that are run by the Swedish Institute. One is at Sweden SE, and this is the kind of, if Sweden were a person, this is what they tweet about. So they promote Sweden through this account. And they also have the at Sweden account, which very interesting idea. The Swedish Institute actually gives control of that account to different Swedes in the country for a 1-week period and allows them in a very hands-off, laissez-faire manner to tweet what they want to tweet about regarding Sweden. So very cool stuff. And they also have a Facebook page. And I wanted to interview the editors behind those accounts because what's interesting is that after Trump had made his statement, the official accounts representing Sweden came out with a campaign about fact checking and having your information right. And they used this political event and this media event to basically break some of the common misconceptions about Sweden and particularly about immigrants. So one of the videos was about the accusations that Sweden is a rape capital in Europe because of immigrations and asylum seekers. And basically, the argument was rape in Sweden is very widely construed, and that's why the statistics pump up instances of rape that wouldn't be counted as rape in other countries. So I was able to get a hold of, and I'm going to let her say her own last name because the Swedish R can be a little bit tricky, Emma
Randecker.
is an editor-in-chief of the Sweden.se account and also runs the Curators of Sweden project, which is the one that gives the handle to different Swedes in the country. And again, there's a little bit of problem with the audio. Apologize for that. But the material is really great. And I think the whole concept of representing a country on social media, but also using that platform to respond and also correct some misconceptions about what's going on in Sweden is very cool. And I think it's quite unique. So without further ado, let me welcome Emma to the show. Emma, thanks so much for taking the time out and welcome to the Social Media and Politics podcast.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
You're an editor of the webpage Sweden.se, and you also run the Twitter handle @Sweden, right?
Yep, that's correct.
And we'll dig into that a little bit more in a moment. But when I was looking up your page on the Swedish Institute's website, I saw that you're working in a unit called Brand Sweden. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about how you and your colleagues approach branding a nation, and more specifically, the role that social media plays in that branding and communication strategy?
Okay, yeah, I'll try. Well, I think for some people it's a bit controversial to talk about Sweden or any country as a brand, but we somehow think it makes it pretty clear still that it is sort of what we treat it like. We have a country that we want to promote, and the country is associated with various values and ideas about what Sweden is and is not. So that's why we think talking about Brand Sweden still makes sense. We don't use it in Swedish, though, actually, so it works better in English.
So it's more of like an international outreach type of initiative.
Yes, exactly. In Swedish, we call it that we work with Sweden communication, which is more neutral, I suppose. And yes, how we do it is there are several organizations working with Sweden promotion in different ways. And we have together produced like a communication strategy for Sweden, which basically comes down to strengths that Sweden has and that we know that Sweden is already known for abroad, which we then use to focus our communication on certain topics like sustainability and gender equality, things like that. Mm-hmm. Since it's difficult, obviously, to make oneself heard out there today, we need to have a focused communication somehow.
Mm-hmm. And how big is social media in that strategy? I mean, do you use other platforms aside from social media, or is it a completely digital campaign?
No, we work on many different levels. I have colleagues working with like producing exhibitions that we tour around the world. So very physical stuff as well. And then there's, scholarships is part of that as well, that we offer scholarships to people to come study in Sweden. But I'm involved in the digital communications only. So
And before we move into that, I'm curious because when you talk about projecting certain values on behalf of Sweden, it gets kind of political. And so, is there any connection between your strategy or the Swedish Institute and the government of the day? Do they kind of have a say in what values are promoted, or is Sweden.se kind of independent from government oversight?
Well, the Swedish Institute is a government agency, but all government agencies in Sweden are independent. So we are completely independent. We do get this instruction every year, what our role should be, basically, but that's very, it doesn't have many details. It's like you should promote Sweden in digital channels, basically. Things like that. And then there can be certain focus areas that we need to bear in mind, like the feminist foreign policy, for example, is one of those things that we should include in our communications as well.
Mm-hmm. A feminist foreign policy.
Yeah.
Interesting. What's that exactly? I'm just curious.
Oh, that you should be interviewing the foreign ministry about.
Okay. We'll keep on topic then.
Well, no, but it has has to do with that we have a minister for foreign affairs who is very adamant in saying, that we need to focus on women and children out there in the world. That's where we can make a big difference, and we need to have that perspective with us in everything that we do to make the world a slightly better place.
Right. And so, getting back to social media, which platforms are you on, representing Sweden, and what differences do you kind of observe between the platforms that you're on?
We are on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and as of very recently, Instagram. And I have colleagues working with the promotion of Sweden as a study destination in particular, and they are also on Snapchat. Mm-hmm. And they also have some blogs. I think that's pretty much that.
And is there a difference? I mean, do you communicate things differently on Twitter than you would on Facebook? Or is it kind of the same message just reproduced on different platforms?
We, for resource reason, we normally reproduce the same message across all the channels. But we know that there is a difference. I mean, on Twitter, you find more opinion makers. On Facebook, it's more like, normal people, so to speak.
Right. And how's Google Plus working out for you?
That is
because I don't think anyone's on it, right?
That is a very good question. It's a channel we still don't understand ourselves, really. It's like it grows by itself, and we have quite little activity, but there is some activity on our account. But we think it's a slightly older target group from what we've seen. But yeah, we're not putting any effort into that channel in particular. It's mostly Facebook and Twitter.
Right. And so, and are you actually tweeting from the @Sweden handle? Is that you personally, or is it a team?
At Sweden, we never touch. I just administer that account. At Sweden is a very particular case where a new person gets to tweet there every week.
Right. This is the Curators of Sweden project, correct?
Yes, that is the @Sweden account. We tweet on the @Sweden SE.
Right. Okay.
Account.
I was slightly confused.
So, yeah, I know. It is quite confusing. Yes, that's us tweeting. We're at the moment a group of 3 who help out to come up with content for the channels.
And so, but it's you personally typing it into your phone or computer and tweeting out.
Yeah, exactly. Me or one of my colleagues.
Because I wanted to zero in specifically on the reaction to Trump's last night in Sweden statement.
Yep.
Because if you're the one in charge of that account, I mean, there was a whole media blitz behind that. Right after it happened, there was a lot of comical, hashtag last night in Sweden videos with the Swedish chef and stuff. But what was it like? How did you hear about it? And kind of what first went through your head?
Well, it was...
As the manager of the Twitter account, because the storm is coming, right?
It was mad. I was away skiing and woke up in the morning, and I had... we have this... How do I explain it? Like an alarm function connected to the @Sweden account. So when there's an unusual amount of activity on the account, I get an SMS, a text, saying basically a check if anything's going on. And there were tons of them from all night. I'm like, oh, what's happening? And just after that, I got a text from the person who was then @Sweden, Emma Johansson.
Right.
Who said, I've just been contacted by Mashable. They want to do an interview with me. And that's how it started. That was the first media attention. And then it just went on all day with Swedish media calling and BBC. And yeah, and she handled it so well.
Right. And I think because I had planned to ask you about the Curators of Sweden later, but I guess for our listeners, we should talk about it now, which is you have actually 2 different Twitter handles, right? You have Sweden SE and then Sweden. Yep. And you and your team run the Sweden SE account.
Yeah.
And then there's the Curators of Sweden project that runs the @Sweden. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because it's quite cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It was started in December 2011, so it's already more than 5 years old. The idea was that every week a new person gets to be at Sweden. The idea being that we talk a lot about Sweden being so open, transparent, democratic, whatnot. And we talk about freedom of speech, how that's important to Sweden. And with this project, we really wanted to show that in practice by giving the word to random people. And it has been working out like that ever since. So that's now, I think, 165,000 tweets or more on the account.
Geez. And is there a screening process for that? Or do you just apply to be it and then any average citizen can have it? Or do you have to have a certain number of Twitter followers, or do you have to have some kind of influence in society?
Anyone can nominate anyone else. So you can't nominate yourself. You need to be an active Twitterer, because you need to know how the channel works, and and then we are a group of 4 people who do the selection committee, if you like. We go through the nominations and basically just try to achieve as good a mix as possible between gender, age, where they live, their backgrounds, to give the broadest possible picture of Sweden when you sum all these people up, basically.
And has that ever gotten any controversy or gotten you guys into trouble when you just kind of devolve the official Sweden Twitter handle to someone, even though they've been screened? I mean, have they sort of taken it too far? Have they said something inappropriate? Has there been any backlash?
Depends how you define trouble or controversy, I suppose. In this case, I tend to really use the cliche that any PR is good PR. But yes, there have been several cases where media have picked up on stuff that the curators have been writing all through the years, basically. But whenever that has happened, also the number of followers goes up.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, I don't know if you want me to mention anything in particular. We had
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
One example. Yeah. The beginning of last year, there was a girl who had the account and she apologized to Israel on behalf of our foreign minister. Regards the whole Palestine thing, which was really, then we were
right.
This could go very badly. Well, myself and another colleague who do the administration of the account, and we try to stay in touch with the person who is at Sweden. So then I think I just sent a text and, bear in mind that you are managing the @Sweden account, and politics is maybe, or foreign politics especially, is maybe an area we should try to steer clear of.
Right.
But we never tell them what to do or what to write. They are free to write whatever they want, but we can obviously see the trouble it can cause, and we want the account to stay open. So
yeah, and so sometimes, they may not go looking for trouble, but they might find it. In the case of Emma, and she was running the account during the whole Trump media storm with the Last Night in Sweden comment. And who was Emma exactly?
She is a librarian in Borås, just outside
southern Sweden,
Gothenburg.
right?
Yeah. And she's on sick leave. I think she has a broken leg or something. So she was when she got the question, she was like, oh, yeah, it's actually perfect because I have so much time on my hand right now. Not knowing, obviously, what was going to hit her.
Right. And so what happened? How did she react?
Well, she was really, really cool. We had a lot of contact that Sunday then when it all started happening to check if she was all right. And I said, you are free to say no, obviously, to these interviews if you don't feel comfortable doing that. But she was she was just laughing and saying, no, it's fun. Well, it's a lot of action and it's crazy, but I like it. She was brilliant. She did a really good job of just being herself. And I mean, from the beginning, how she handled the actual Twitter account and the questions she got there about what's happening in Sweden. She was just like, no, nothing's happening here.
So I'm curious as to how, I mean, if you're going to take on this responsibility, I would say, of representing Sweden, I mean, do the curators generally take a week off of work and kind of just focus on that? Because I imagine it's quite a lot of tweets, right?
Yeah, I've always wondered myself, but no, normally not. Most people do have a job and they do this somehow in between things at work.
And so, because the tweets I was looking at were from a guy named Frederick. So I guess he was the curator after Emma.
Well, the problem is with Twitter, with this whole idea of changing a person every week, Twitter doesn't show when you change the profile picture. That will be the picture for all the tweets from the beginning of the project, if you see what I mean.
Oh, okay.
So you can't actually see when you look at the flow, you don't see where the change happens. You have to know the dates and know that every Monday a new person starts. So Fredrik has only been since Monday now.
Okay. Because it looked like every tweet had ever been sent by Frederick. That's what you mean, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I don't know if, and just to fill the listeners in, Frederick is a rock journalist, right? That's his profession.
Yep.
So I thought it was him. Maybe it was Emma. But when I was looking at the tweets, they were quite politically charged, and that they definitely took a stance, whether that was sort of calling out Fox News or talking about Trump or immigration in Sweden, which are all very sensitive topics. But one tweet in particular stuck out, which was, quote, "I am Sweden, and the views and opinions expressed in these tweets are shared by the entire Swedish population, or they should be." Quotation mark. So, this is pretty political stuff, and I guess I'm just wondering. I think you've already answered the question, which is you just sort of you let it go, no matter what, and even if someone claims to represent the entire country, it's a really sort of free speech forum, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we send them guidelines beforehand, but
and what are in those guidelines?
Well, many are basically based on common sense, but there are 3 ground rules in the guidelines that we say we will not censor any tweets as long as they don't violate any Swedish laws, as long as they are not commercial in nature, as long as they don't threaten the safety of others. So, and based on that, we have actually only ever deleted 1 tweet in these 5 years.
Is it too controversial to say on air, or what the subject matter was?
No, it's fine actually. Well, the thing was, it was Sunday, the last day for one guy who was at Sweden, and he hadn't been very controversial during the week. It was nothing strange, but then he posted an image of, do you know Lars Vilks, the artist who's living under death threat since many years back for making these roundabout dogs the shape of Mohammed?
No, is he the same one that there was an attempted assassination in Copenhagen a few years ago?
Yes. Uh-huh. So the guy posted an image of one of these roundabout dogs, but he didn't write anything that could connect it, really. He didn't write what it was, so most people didn't pick up on it. It was only that the person who took over the next day, she started, and after like 1 hour I got a call, and she was panicking, and she was saying, "You have to remove me from this account." And I was like, "What's going on?" And it was her boss had then seen the Twitter account and seen her image next to this roundabout dog, and he was like, "What are you doing? How you can't tweet something like this?" Yeah, it was very strange. But then we realized that something like that could actually be considered a threat to the safety of all future curators if someone would know what it is and connect it to that person, since every new person's photo will be next to that image.
Right. And there's no way Twitter can sort that out for you guys?
No, it's a technical thing. Twitter wasn't made to be a rotation curation system.
So let's go back to the Trump reaction to the last night in Sweden comment, which when I was looking at your Facebook, I got the sense that Sweden.se launched a kind of mini campaign, or a lot of the posts were focused around the Swedish word källkritik, which means fact check. So can you tell us a little bit about the message there and kind of how you chose it? Was it kind of an active promotion campaign, or what was the kind of official response on Facebook like?
Well, this was a completely new situation for us. It was a unique amount of media interest, both for Sweden in general, but also for us. And the head of department, he took part in so many interviews as well. So we decided to have meetings every morning to just talk about, okay, what happened in the last 24 hours, what has been written about Sweden, which hashtags are trending, what sort of content should we produce right now, what makes sense. And normally we have a low profile, I'd say. It's more like, facts about Sweden, about gender equality and whatnot. Also just beautiful pictures of Swedish landscapes and things like that. Right. So, and at the beginning of the week, we said, okay, we should try to stay calm and not like go into discussion and debate with all of the weird facts being spread right now about Sweden. Just try to say, okay, here's another fact about Sweden. But then as the weekend approached, and as the Sweden Democrats wrote an opinion piece for the Washington Post.
Right. And just to fill our listeners in who might not be familiar with Swedish politics, the Sweden Democrats are kind of the sort of immigration critical, seen as xenophobic party, kind of like the sort of extreme right, or like a Tea Party almost equivalent. A lot of our listeners come from the States, so they could kind of maybe get that comparison. But they're a very controversial party in Sweden with about 15%, 10%, somewhere around there.
Yep. So anyway, so they wrote this opinion piece for the Washington Post, basically just saying, thank you, Mr. Trump, for setting things straight. Which was basically, we had been working all week, how do we convey the message that he got his facts wrong? And there they were saying thank you, and these issues of all the violence in Sweden and whatnot need to get more attention. And that's when we decided basically that we need to do something more. We need to, roll up our sleeves and actually take the fight.
Right.
So during last weekend, we had 4 short, fact videos produced about the biggest themes in discussions at the moment, which were, I don't know if you have heard this, Sweden has been called, especially in social media over the last, especially after Trump's speech, that we've been called like the rape capital of Europe.
Right.
Which is based on a lot of misconceptions about how the Swedish system collapsed in connection with all of the refugees that arrived in 2015. And now I'm trying to remember all these 4 themes. Basically the cost of receiving so many immigrants, to get those facts straight as well, because sometimes people say, you live in luxury. Refugees in Sweden live in luxury, and it's obviously not true. I wish it were true, but because they would deserve it, but it's not. They get a very low amount of money to get by. And now I can't have the 4th one in my head. But anyway, so 4 films focusing on getting the facts straight, basically.
Right. Kind of linking it to this whole discussion, the broader discussion about fake news and fact checking.
Yes.
Right. Which I think is super smart. And I wanted to ask specifically about the use of video, because the videos you're referring to were kind of, graphic design, more or less slides.
Yeah.
I think everyone's familiar with it by now. When you you see a video on Facebook, it's mostly about the running text, sort of using different sources, and you make sure to cite those as well, which I thought was nice. But you also produced a couple of Facebook Live videos. I saw one that was a question and answer session.
Yep.
Another one was kind of like investigative journalism, where someone actually went to one of these immigrant predominant communities in Rinkeby. And I want to ask a little bit about your motivation for video, but particularly Facebook Live. What was the idea driving that?
Well, we thought what better way to convey transparency and that we are willing to discuss these things than to do it live, basically. The first one you're referring to, the Q&A session, was with this curator, Emma Johansson, who was the first in line after the Trump incident. So we thought it would be nice to include her and also get her to tell her story to our followers live. And 2 colleagues went there to also answer general questions about Sweden.
Because I was just at this social media week event that was in Copenhagen, and we talked a lot about Facebook Live. And one of the things, and the kind of speculation, is that because Mark Zuckerberg wants to promote video, when you go on Facebook Live, it sends a notification to all of your friends. Whereas if you just post something, I think you get something like 5 to 20% organic reach. Was that factored in at all? Like, were you trying to reach everybody by going live, or was that just maybe a side effect?
In this case, it was more of a side effect, but in general, we obviously do want to reach as many people as possible with our content. So it was a very good side effect.
So, and do you pay to promote anything on Facebook or Twitter?
We do every now and then. It's at the moment we don't have anyone here who's a social media strategist, so we're basically working a lot of trial and error things. But yeah, like with the fact videos that I talked about, we realized that it was a bit too much content in too short a time period, which means that they basically, the one post kills the other, so to speak. They didn't have time to grow enough. That's when we said we should probably do a campaign, a paid campaign with these videos, and then you can also choose who you want to reach and where in the world. And so yeah, we do try to experiment a bit with paying sometimes.
So did you actually micro-target certain audiences with these videos? Yeah,
well, we don't know what the result will be. We only started it day before yesterday, and it will be there for a week. So, because we thought the most relevant target group is like Americans, and because, maybe social liberal Americans, because we know that Trump, anyone who voted for Trump will probably not be interested in what we are saying anyway.
That's interesting that you're not trying, because I would think the opposite, that you would want to reach those people specifically, but you're going for more people who are like-minded and who might better receive the message.
Yeah, there's a lot of research on this, and it's extremely difficult to change someone's mind who has a very strong opinion in one direction, but then there are obviously a lot of more neutral people in the middle who don't know what to think, and that's maybe a better chance of convincing someone what's true and what's false.
So, I mean, that's pretty advanced stuff. And you said you don't have any data analysts, right?
Yes, we do. I said we don't have any strategists, really, but...
Do you have a data analyst team, or is it one person, or external help, maybe?
It varies a bit, but it's like a couple of people who follow up on the things we do on our websites and the social media channels. And we are constantly trying to improve what we do with those figures to get better at analyzing them, basically. What does it mean when we have a reach of so-and-so, and how big should it be? What's the potential reach? And all those things.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can answer. I'm curious because I'm a data scientist. So do you know what they're looking for? Are they monitoring hashtags, or what's their kind of role in the communication strategy?
Well, what we are usually after is like engagement and reach. We want to, the best like receipt that we're doing the right thing is that people engage with our content. So that's obviously important, as in commenting and retweeting. And
do you use any other data, basically? Because what I'm thinking is that if you run a campaign promoting, I was thinking the Northern Lights, or the beautiful countryside of Sweden, with a few towns in focus, do you then look and see whether tourism has increased in those areas to see if your outreach might be having a tangible impact?
That's extremely difficult to connect to the work we do. No, well, we do follow, like indexes. There are all sorts of indexes, and like, global sustainability indexes and innovation and whatnot. But to see our role in that, if any, it's impossible. So we try to focus on like what our channels do.
Right, just engagement online.
Yeah. Mostly like that. Yeah.
Okay, so last question for you. Because I thought it was really brilliant how you guys responded with your Facebook campaign. The live videos were great. The investigative journalism I thought was quite cool, and kind of showing the world, right? Which is your kind of your goal.
Yeah.
And as you said, it was kind of you kind of had to come up with this on the fly. It's not something you had, experienced before. Has this changed how you approach Sweden.se, or are you going to incorporate some of this into the future? Has it kind of sparked some ideas?
I think so. Yes, it's too fresh still to be able to. I think we all need some distance to it. But my manager today, she said, this will definitely affect how we work from now on. We will have this with us, like the effect that content can have. And we have already before this obviously been talking about fake news and disinformation and how we should, what should our role be in all of that. We will sit down and go through everything that has happened and see what we can learn from it, basically.
Great. Well, Emma, thanks so much. This has been super interesting. Really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Social Media and Politics Podcast. Thanks for bearing through some of the audio difficulties if you've gotten this far. And remember, if you have a question or an idea about a future episode, please do let us know. You can find us on Twitter at SMNP Podcast, or write us on Facebook, facebook.com/the Social Media and Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, signing off from Copenhagen. See you next time.